This episode is for the writer who still calls themselves aspiring. I'm going to get a little salty in this episode because the truth is that that single word is cannibalizing your author career. Spoiler alert, if you think about yourself as an aspiring writer, it will take you a hell of a lot longer to publish your book than you want. Let's talk about it. You are listening to the Memoir Method podcast, the place for writers, readers, and anyone who appreciates the collective power of our stories. In this podcast, we explore the impact of memoir alongside an examination of writing techniques and strategies used in the genre. Whether you are a writer looking for inspiration and guidance or a passionate reader seeking meaningful connections through shared experiences, the Memoir Method podcast is your go-to conversation spot. I'm your host, Charlotte, editor, writer, and the heart behind Charlotte Writes. Let's get started. I have done an episode similar to this one before, but I wanted to come back to this element of the conversation because this reframe from aspiring writer to published author is so essential to what I do as a memoir editor and writer. So many places I look, I see writers describing themselves as aspiring. In fact, I used to describe the listener of this podcast as an aspiring writer. And once I realized what I'm going to talk about in today's episode, I cut that out of my intro because how we think about ourselves and how we talk about ourselves has a massive impact on what we're actually able to do and create and produce. So, truth time, I went to the dictionary to look up aspiring. I went real basic. And if you look at just the Merriam-Webster's definition of the word aspiring, you will see desiring and working to achieve a particular goal. On its own, if you just look at that as a dictionary definition, that is what you're doing, correct? You are desiring something and you are working to achieve it. But the energy behind that word says everything to me. When I see the word aspiring, I actually feel lack. And maybe there's some industriousness behind there, like you're working for something, which I know that you do. I know that you work hard. I know that you are devoted and passionate and committed to this project. But when it comes to the word, that one word aspiring, I feel an energetic gap between what you say you want and how you see yourself, what you actually are. If you go to LA and meet someone who says that they are an aspiring actor, I'm not going to take them very seriously, if I'm honest. And maybe that is just me falling into the narrative tropes that Hollywood has set out for me. But I think like bad improv. And while mid-improv is neither here nor there, when someone describes themselves as aspiring anything, that tells me so much about how that person sees themselves. So to follow this train of thought with someone who moves to LA to become an actor, it's one thing to do bad improv because you know, okay, I'm actually learning something. I am an actor. This is me investing into my craft. That attitude is very different from I am an aspiring actor and I need to wait for someone to pick me. You see the difference there? And just replace the word actor with writer, and you have countless writers within the publishing industry who are waiting to be picked. That is what the word aspiring communicates to me, is that you're waiting for someone else to let you into that identity that you actually want. So if you call yourself an aspiring writer, I want you to answer this question. What are you waiting to happen for you to actually be a writer? Like, would you feel confident telling someone, oh, I'm a writer? Like, I genuinely want you to think about that question. Even deeper, if you are not comfortable calling yourself a writer, much less an author, to just someone else yet, why? Why aren't you calling yourself an author yet? Why aren't you calling yourself a writer? Why don't you just ditch that word aspiring? What is it about that word that makes you more comfortable, that makes you feel safe? And I go into this mindset so much deeper inside of phase 1 of the memoir method, but the difference between a writer and an author is essential. It's another slight tweak on how you see yourself. What I want to instill in my audience and you, my clients, is that you get to move like a published author right now, before you've even finished your manuscript. It's very backwards from how we are taught to think about the world and how we're taught to think about publishing. But no matter how you publish, the authors who succeed are the ones who assume that they are published. Like they just see that vision for themselves, and that is the person that they are right now. And then eventually how they move now and what they actually want are matched. So here's what's happening when you describe yourself as an aspiring writer, when you use that one adjective. First, you're putting a qualifier on your identity. So slotting the word aspiring between I am and a writer puts an actual barrier on the page between who you are and what you want to be, and an energetic barrier in your mind. Again, it's a qualifier that somehow feels less than what you actually want to be. I think I know why we add that aspiring qualifier to how we describe ourselves. You don't want to come across as too eager. You don't want to come across as too confident, like overly confident or arrogant. You're waiting to see if you'll be accepted, if this desire will be acceptable to the gatekeepers, if you'll fit into the world of publishing. And you don't want to assume success when it hasn't been proven yet. That's why the mindsets that I do teach inside of the memoir method can feel a little delusional, because I'm asking you to pretend that you are a published author already. So I want you to tap into what that would feel like and ask yourself, what would the published author version of me do today? How would she respond to this email? How would she engage with these edits, with this rewrite? How would she come into this writing session? How would she navigate this one energy drain in her life so that she can actually prioritize her manuscript? Like, that's what we think about. We think about the version of you who's published, and then you get to answer, okay, what would she actually be doing right now? And then you do that right now. And yes, this is delusional, but I think that it's fun. It's fun for me to tap into a version of myself who doesn't actually exist yet. But in tapping into that, I make that version of me exist. This is delusional in a way that makes publishing a field to play in instead of a game to play, which means it's a game you could lose. This is more just a field of possibilities. That's what this mindset's going to do for you. And my favorite writers to work with are actually the ones who hold that author energy, the ones who are determined, like, nope, this is going to happen. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know all the details, but it's going to happen. And that's how they show up to the work. The truth about the publishing industry, I'm going to be a little blunt here. Publishing does not care about how good you are. They don't actually care about your talent as much as you think they do. Publishers are also not very eager to play with timid writers. They don't have time for that. They need to make money, and so they need writers who are really confident in what they do. And no matter how you publish, traditionally or independently, you have to tap into that published author energy before you have your book in hand. You have to do that. That's the way that you're going to attract writers. That's the way that you are going to give off an energy of confidence, of authority, of this is the conversation that I'm here to have, and I am the perfect person to be having it. Publishing a book requires commitment, tenacity, and some chutzpah. You need to have that now. You need to put aside the version of you that's afraid, or at least just put her in the passenger seat instead of having her in the driver's seat. You get to expect that readers are waiting for you right now, because they are. Writers who write while secretly believing that no one would really care about their book are not likely to publish. These are the writers who are likely to leave a draft waiting on their computer for decades. And I will be honest, we all have those thoughts about our work. I'm not saying that I have not been insecure about my writing or about my reach or about my potential or about my career within the publishing industry. We all have those thoughts about our work. So I don't want to shame you for having moments when you second guess yourself. It happens to everyone. It's part of the creative process. The trick, though, is how you navigate those thoughts when they show up. So let me walk you through an example. You have this thought. This isn't that great. No one will want to read this. Every single writer has thought this at one point. Every single one, myself included, multiple points, I have thought this. So in this example, you slam the laptop shut, rolling your eyes. You're in a mood the whole rest of the day. You numb out by scrolling on Instagram. But what happens is that the more you consume, the more you compare yourself to other writers, which never works out. And now you start thinking, I'll never be as successful as they are. It's just because they're lucky. They're able to have this author career because of ABC that I don't have. You start making up excuses or reasons for why they're successful and you're not. And you feel some envy, even if you won't acknowledge it as that at the time. So now let's rewind. And I want to play out a different scenario from the same thought. Oh, this isn't that great. No one will want to read this. You close your laptop. You take a really deep breath. You jot down what was frustrating about this writing session because it just felt off. You did not like what you wrote, but like you wanted to show up because you want to be committed, but you don't really know what went wrong. So you just kind of jot down some thoughts, brainstorming what could be blocking you from figuring out how to say what you want to say. And you take another deep breath and you just go back into your life. You just need a break. Maybe you run to the grocery store or squeeze in a workout. You listen to some music that you love. That negative thought presses in every now and then, but every time it pops in, you don't give it more energy. You just notice that it's there and you move on. You bat it away the same way that you would a fly. You're not trying to convince yourself otherwise. You don't have to lie to yourself. But you're not believing that thought just because you have it, right? Just because we have a thought doesn't make it true. And that is the emotional intelligence that you are leading yourself with in this process of being a writer. Later in the day, you dip into the novel that you're reading because that's what makes you feel the most yourself. And it's just been kind of a weird day. You've been really trying to bounce back from this frustrating writing session. And so you're doing something that you love to do. As you're reading, you feel this jolt of inspiration. You run back to your laptop and you start writing again. Everything just flows. And in contrast to how you felt at the beginning of the day, now you're feeling triumphant because you smoothed out the parts of your writing that weren't working. What happened is that you persevered, you waited, you were present in your day, and you didn't give those negative thoughts any more bandwidth. The result is writing that you love. Even though it might not be perfect, it's there and it's ready for refinement, and it's work that you are excited to get back into later. That is the difference between an aspiring writer and a published author. The published author version of you may get discouraged, but she does not build her house there. The published author version of you trusts the process, even when it's not linear. The published author version of you loves the way that she writes, and she loves to improve. She follows the fun and excitement of the process, knowing that that will lead her to her readers. Do you see the difference here? The aspiring writer had the same thought as the published author version. They had the exact same thought. They started in the same place. But how they navigated that thought was wildly different. One believed the thought and outsourced her creative power to an industry and eventually felt even more imposter syndrome and felt even lower. The other thought the thought, felt whatever she needed to for a moment, and then she released it. And she waited for the sparks to flow back in. The aspiring writer will probably get back to her manuscript in a day or 2 or 5. But the published author jumped back in that same day because a spark came back. This is why I don't want you to think about yourself as an aspiring writer. Because when you embrace that published author energy, the entire way that you show up to your work will shift. It is so much more fun to witness as an editor this energy shift, and it's even more fun to experience as a writer myself. The words that you use over yourself are important, and I want you to pay attention to the language that you use to describe yourself as a writer. This deep mindset work is integral to the work that I do inside of the Memoir Method, and it's woven throughout each of the 3 phases of the program. For more career-changing insights into memoir and the publishing industry, I want to invite you into my free private podcast series, Published. This is on a separate feed from this podcast, and it will be delivered straight to your inbox. If you are ready to actually ditch aspiring, I want you to just strike it out from your vocabulary, stop using it. If you're ready to do that and step fully into that published author headspace, you want to be in the room when I teach the Memoir Method. Phase 1 is already instant access. This is actually the part of the program where I kick off with that author mindset. I go so much deeper into that. I thread it through every module. And I'm putting the finishing touches on phase 2 right now. This program is like nothing that I've ever seen anywhere else. And if you want to transform into that published author version of you, then the Memoir Method is where you want to be. Head to the link in the show notes to enroll, and I will see you on the inside. Have a great weekend. Never call yourself aspiring ever again, and I'll see you next time. You've just listened to an episode of the Memoir Method podcast. The Memoir Method podcast is presented by Charlotte Wrights. If you liked what you heard, the best way to support the show is to subscribe through your preferred podcast player. And if you're feeling especially inspired, I'd love it if you left a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Leaving a review really does help other readers and writers like yourself find the show. If you want to continue the conversation, you can find me on my website at charlottewrites.co or on Instagram at charlottejanewrites. Thank you for tuning in. I'll see you next time. And remember that you have a story that matters.